Hello. Those of you who know me know that there are two kinds of astrology that I focus on. One is traditional mundane astrology, which is the astrology of nations and events and leaders of nations, where we try and understand the cycles of history and where things are headed. The other kind of astrology I focus on is scientific evidence-based astrology, where I and a few other researchers around the world, we use tools such as statistics to analyze uh, astrology and see what works and what doesn't work. And there is good statistical evidence from statistics and also from extreme case sampling, which supports a lot of traditional astrology, but also modifies traditional astrology in certain ways. Well, today I'm making a recording of a presentation that I'm going to make in just a few days to my local astrology group in Phoenix, Astrology Arizona. But near the start of this presentation, I'll have a link to a web page where you can access all of my slides for this presentation. And then there'll be a second link, which will open up a short document I've written, which gives you an overview of what we now have confidence in based upon scientific exploration of astrology. And that is really worth looking at, whether you're into statistical analysis of astrology or not. This is good information to have. Just as doctors need to know what science says about what works and what doesn't work in their discipline, astrologers need to know about these discoveries that are currently being made in astrology through applying scientific methods to them. So this is a long presentation. I'm going to go fast, but get your cameras ready. If you want to take a picture of that slide I have near the start of my presentation, which gives those two web addresses for additional information. Okay, now I just need to share my screen here, so give me a minute. And I need to get rid of some of these panels that are in my way so I can see what I'm doing. And hold on, I'm almost there. Okay, and we're ready. Astrology Arizona, the summer of change, the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, and the Uranus and Gemini, Neptune-Pluto, double-sextile trine. This presentation is going to talk about actually three things coming up. Three things that are overlapping: the conjunction of Saturn and Neptune, which happens about roughly every 36 years, but as I like to say, this is not your parents' Saturn-Neptune conjunction or even your grandparents' Saturn-Neptune conjunction. There are a lot of indications that this one is going to be even more powerful than previous Saturn-Neptune conjunctions we've seen in our lifetime. All right, another thing we're going to talk about is Uranus and Gemini, and if that were the only thing happening this summer, that by itself would be big news. But that is going to be part of this Uranus-Neptune-Pluto double-sextile trine. We'll have off and on for the next 4 years, we'll have Uranus sextile Neptune, Neptune sextile Pluto, Pluto trine Uranus, not just once, but we'll have 5 exact trines in the coming year. So a lot of powerful things are going on, and we're going to talk about why we should probably expect big changes in the years ahead. Okay, let's get started. All right, this is the part where you might want to get out your camera and take a picture of these web addresses. The first one, AA, that's Astrology Arizona Summer of Change.pdf. That will bring up a PDF version of the slides in this presentation. And the second one, whatweknow.pdf, that will bring up a short document which gives an overview of things we have increased confidence in as a result of scientific research into astrology. Okay, and this is just a summary of some of the things we have more confidence in. That is toward the end of that presentation or that document. And that document, it contains references to a lot of published and a few maybe soon to be published studies that have been done, scientific studies that have been peer reviewed and published in journals. All right. Now, what do we expect from the Saturn-Neptune conjunction in Aries? And we're in the midst of a near conjunction this summer. June, July, and August, Saturn and Neptune, they don't make an exact conjunction, but they stay within 1 degree orb of one another throughout the entire summer. And then that conjunction becomes exact on the 20th of February, 2026. Now, past Saturn-Neptune conjunctions, when I look at events that have occurred, I can categorize them this way. 1, dissolving and breaking down. This is particularly what happens when Neptune gets the upper hand. Neptune likes to dissolve boundaries. For instance, in 1989, there was a conjunction, and around the time of that conjunction, the Berlin Wall came down, and we literally saw that structure dissolving before our very eyes. Okay, 2, new visions, protests building up. I include protests here because the protests are quite often the new vision that is being promoted. And I should also point out that new visions are not always good visions. Sometimes the new vision is freedom. Other times it's communism. Okay, 3, oppression, censorship, and boundaries. Well, when this happens, Saturn gets the upper hand. Sometimes Saturn gets the upper hand in this process. There is resistance to the breaking down of boundaries, and that results in increased oppression, censorship, and attempts to strengthen those boundaries. So, in number 3, Saturn gets the upper hand, and number 1, Neptune gets the upper hand, and number 2, that is more likely to be cases where Saturn and Neptune are working together. But again, the new vision is not necessarily a good vision, just simply new. And then descensions and ascensions. These are people who have died under these conjunctions, people who are replacing them under these conjunctions. Okay. Now, I should also point out that research has shown that major events can occur up to a year at least before one of these outer planet conjunctions or oppositions. So some of the events I'm going to look at are things which happened earlier this year, particularly once Donald Trump began his second term as president. Now, I've got a list of things with dates. I'm just going to go over the things in 2025 for the most part, and that's one reason why you probably want to use that address for the slideshow so that you can download the whole thing and read and ponder more deeply those things that I'm going to go over very quickly. So, ever since Trump became president again, he has been dissolving structures in our government and our democracy. So we have Trump and Doge break down government structures. Trump breaks down global trade through tariffs, begins mass deportations, disrespects most of our allies, stymies growth in the economy and the stock market. Oh, this next one I find very interesting, airplane malfunctions. We often think of Neptune as being connected to water in the oceans, anything liquid, because liquids do not have well-defined boundaries like solids do. But that also applies to the atmosphere. The atmosphere is another kind of ocean. And it's amazing to me how many malfunctions there have been with airplanes this year in the United States and elsewhere. Plane crashes, near misses, it's just one after another. And I relate that to this conjunction of Saturn and Neptune. Remember, they're conjunct this summer. They don't have an exact conjunction, but they're within 1 degree orb all summer long. And these kinds of characteristic events can happen at least a year before the exact conjunction. Let's see, next item here, measles outbreak in America. We often see waves of viruses or pandemics, epidemics of some sort during these Saturn-Neptune conjunctions. For instance, we had the Spanish flu in around 1918. And let's see, around 52, 53, I think it was 52, that cases of polio reached their peak in America, again during another Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Okay, let's continue with events that have happened this year. Roof collapse at a concert in San Domingo killed hundreds. There's a large power outage in Spain and Portugal, these horrific fires in Los Angeles. I've noticed that environmental events, uh, fires, earthquakes, volcanoes, they seem to happen a little bit more frequently during Saturn-Neptune conjunctions and to be more severe. So we've also had major wildfires in Canada, major 6.0 and larger earthquakes, major volcanic eruptions around the Pacific Rim and even elsewhere in the world. And of course, Israel and the U.S. Bombed Iran last month in June. And that's interesting because early July, um, Uranus went into Gemini. And when Uranus goes into Gemini, it's more common for America to get involved in conflicts, either home or abroad. And so, us bombing Iran was one symptom of that. It sort of foreshadowed Uranus moving into Gemini. Likewise, Trump sending the Marines into Los Angeles. That foreshadows Uranus moving into Gemini. And by the way, note here in 1989, during a Saturn-Neptune conjunction, which happened that year, the U.S. invaded Panama. We invaded Panama, captured Noriega, brought him back to America, and threw him into prison. And what has Trump been talking about? He's been talking about taking over Panama, taking over the Panama Canal. Same astrological configuration, same kind of result. Okay, now let's see. I'm going to fast forward to new visions, protests, and building up. And again, remember, new visions aren't necessarily good visions. So far this year, we've had Trump expressing desires to take over Canada, Greenland, Panama Canal, and Gaza. He has proposed removing all Palestinians from Gaza. He has renamed the Gulf of Mexico the Gulf of America. There have been mass protests, such as the No Kings protests and others, against Trump's policies here in America and around the world. There have been mass protests in Indonesia, Turkey, Mali, protests in Pretoria in South Africa, and even several courts have pushed back against Trump policies. So we're seeing both these new visions and a lot of protests occurring. By the way, I see one thing down here for 1953. Television became popular around 1952, 53 in this country and abroad, and we often see media changes in media when Saturn and Neptune come into conjunction. Around 1917, it was World War I, and radio was becoming very popular because people wanted to hear the news about the war. In 53, television was becoming popular because of the coronation of Queen Elizabeth II. That was the first coronation televised. And also because in America, I Love Lucy was very popular, and many people tuned in for the episode of the birth of little Ricky. Okay. In 1989, it was the first internet service providers that were becoming available in 1989. That was the beginning of the public internet. All right. So as we move into this Saturn-Neptune conjunction, that'll be exact on the 20th of February, 2026. One of the questions in my mind is, what type of mass media thing might become popular at this point? And I saw an article the other day where Zuckerberg was predicting that smart glasses were going to be the next big thing. These are glasses that connect to the internet. They can bring you news. They can take pictures. They can give you your mail. They're integrated in with artificial intelligence. You can ask it questions, do all sorts of things. So that might be the next big media thing for humanity. All right, let's move on. In terms of oppression, censorship, and boundaries, well, there has been a lot of that in America. Trump deports people without due process, invoking the Alien Enemies Act. And by the way, its predecessors, the Espionage Act and the Sedition Act, came about in 1917, 1918, as a result of another Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Let's see, Trump engages in censorship of words and policies he doesn't like. Diversity, for instance, is now a forbidden word. He's been engaging in political retribution. We mentioned that he sent the Marines into Los Angeles. There's also been violent crackdowns by the Syrian transitional government. And for past Saturn-Neptune conjunctions, I have a list of other things that happen in connection with them. Now, some of the transitions that have occurred, sadly, Pope Francis died, and Robert Prevost, he ascended. He became Pope Leo the 14th. Justin Trudeau has resigned. And just looking at some past transitions, Nelson Mandela was released from prison in 1990. Emperor Hirohito died in 1989. Stalin died in 1953. And Khrushchev rose to power. And of course, King George VI of Britain died in 1952, and Queen Elizabeth II had her coronation in 1953. David Ben-Gurion resigned as Prime Minister of Israel in 1953. King Hussein was crowned King of Jordan in 1953, and his father, King Talal, had abdicated in 1952. And likewise, King Farouk of Egypt abdicated in 1952. And in 1917, Tsar Nicholas II abdicated, and he and his family were executed the following year. So there's all sorts of changes that happen with people and places and things during these Saturn-Neptune conjunctions. Just today, right before recording this, I saw the news that Hulk Hogan passed away. I looked at his chart. I believe he was born during a strong Saturn-Neptune conjunction, if I'm not mistaken, and he has now died during a Saturn-Neptune conjunction. Again, if I'm not mistaken, I think the same thing is also true of John Lennon, that he was born and died during Saturn-Neptune conjunctions. But I may be wrong. I'll have to double check that. Now, this is one of the reasons why I say this is not going to be your parents or your grandparents' Saturn-Neptune conjunction. This conjunction on February 20th of 2026, it occurs within the first degree of Aries. That places it on what we call a world axis. The world axis points are the first degrees of the cardinal signs, Aries, Cancer, Libra, and Capricorn. That in itself makes it more powerful. But the last time we had a conjunction of Saturn and Neptune in the first degree of Aries was approximately 6,000 years ago, in the year 4361 BCE, before the Common Era. And this was around the time that historians call the dawn of civilization. This was around the time that people began to develop writing and began to develop calendar systems, and recorded history began. So I look upon this Saturn-Neptune conjunction as the end of one 6,000-year cycle and the beginning of perhaps another 6,000-year cycle. My big question is, are we going to see the next big evolutionary leap for humanity? Or is this the end of humanity's cycle? We rose to prominence 6,000 years ago, and maybe we're on our way out. Well, I think it's going to be the next evolutionary leap. We're not going to get there without some birth pains. That's for sure. I think we are moving forward, but it's also true that it only takes one bad man with a bomb to destroy the world. So I can't rule anything out. Now, very quickly, what do we expect from the Uranus-Neptune-Pluto double-sextile trine? Well, I believe that some individuals will experience greater enlightenment. Most people will find themselves at least opening up to new perspectives and a more global or cosmic point of view. I also expect rapid growth of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, biotechnology, and information technology from Pluto and Aquarius. Explosions of inventions and creative thought from Uranus and Gemini, and new visions being brought into physical reality as a result of Neptune and Aries. Now, this Uranus, Neptune, Pluto double sextile trine, it's going to be with us off and on for the next 4 years. Over the next 4 years, there will be periods when all of those aspects get within 1 degree of being exact. So it lasts for several years. The last time we had a Uranus, Neptune, Pluto double sextile trine that endured for a few years, this time with a 5-degree orb, was in 476 CE, 476 of the Common Era. And that year saw the fall of the Western Roman Empire and the beginning of the Middle Ages in Europe, what we also call medieval times. So we have 2 big indications that we are in a time of great transition. We're ending up this very momentous 6,000-year cycle of Saturn-Neptune conjunctions at the start of Aries and beginning what may be another 6,000-year cycle. And under the double sextile trine between Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, that also seems to end and begin some very important new cycles. So 2 big indications right there that we are at the start of something big. Now, children born under this kind of configuration, when they grow up, they are going to be phenomenal because they are going to have this higher, more transcendent perspective on things. I and several of the people I grew up with, I was born with a very strong Pluto Neptune sextile. I had Pluto at 19 degrees Leo and Neptune at 19 degrees Libra. And those people like me who have that aspect in their charts we're more transcendent. We're more cosmic. We go beyond just the visible world. Okay. And in 476 CE, one of the children born at that time who grew up to do something remarkable was this man in India named Aryabhata. He was the first great mathematician astronomer of the classical age of Indian mathematics and astronomy. He knew, he appears to have known that the planets revolved around the sun, that the sun was the center of the solar system. He understood eclipses and what caused them. And he pretty much invented trigonometry. He came up with the definitions for sine and cosine. Now, we also tend to get new philosophies and often new religious movements and philosophies uh, during things or configurations between outer planets like this one. And thus, I note that the first Shinto shrines appeared in Japan in 478 CE. Okay, let's look in more detail. That's kind of an overview of these things, but let's look in more detail at the Saturn-Neptune conjunction and see even more reasons why it's going to be very powerful. First of all, Neptune entered Aries this year on March 30th, and when Neptune leaves Pisces for Aries, people want to turn visions into realities. The impetus is now to take action based upon beliefs and worldviews. Also, wars and aggression based on belief systems are more likely. The last time Neptune went into Aries was the day after the start of the American Civil War. Neptune, since it dissolves boundaries, it can weaken our restraints. And of course, Aries can be very aggressive and very assertive. And it wasn't just America that was at war in 1861. There were hot spots all around the globe. So in that year, we had the American Civil War, serfdom abolished in Russia, Benito Juarez captured Mexico City, the Bamana Empire of Mali fell, the Taranaki War ended in New Zealand. There's a peasant uprising in Bezdana, Russia, the Taiping Rebellion in China. The Argentine Civil War was going on at that time. There were Australian frontier wars and a war of resistance in French Indochina. And for those of you who are too young to know, French Indochina, that is Vietnam. The conflict in Vietnam goes back a long, long time. Now, this last thing I have here, it doesn't have to do with war, but I thought it's interesting because Neptune is connected with all liquids and in particular with oil. And when Neptune went into Aries in 1861, the whale oil industry came to an end and the petroleum oil industry began. Another interesting shift. Now, Saturn entered Aries on May 24th, 2025. And when Saturn leaves Pisces for Aries, people want to build the structures they've been dreaming about. And as Saturn and Neptune become conjunct, old structures will dissolve as new social movements emerge. Okay, here's some information for you. These graphs just show how long the Saturn-Neptune conjunction lasts this summer. Doesn't become exact, but this is a period within which things are within 1 degree of orb. And then we have it again back in February into a little bit of March in 2026. Exact conjunction on February 20th. Things get within 1 degree of orb at the start of the second week of February and continues through the first half of the first week of March. Okay, this slide is also informational, and this shows when these Neptune, Saturn, and Uranus turn retrograde and when they go back into their previous signs. Now, Neptune went retrograde on July 4th, Saturn went retrograde on July 12th. So those two planets have just barely dipped their toe into Aries. They're testing the waters, or I should say the fire. And earlier this month, they both decided it's like they're saying, wait a minute, we need to think about this before we go any further in. And Uranus entered Gemini on July 7th. It's going to turn retrograde on September 5th. So it's dipping its toe into, or I should say, sticking its finger up in the air. And it's going to have second thoughts for a while, beginning September 5th. And then it will go back into Taurus on November 7th. Meanwhile, Saturn goes back into Pisces on September 1st. Neptune goes back into Pisces on October 22nd. But early on in 2026, Saturn and Neptune will go back into Aries. They will have that exact conjunction on February 20th. And then on April 25th of 2026, Uranus will go back into Gemini. And so from that point on, it's really a new world with Uranus in Gemini, Neptune in Aries, as is Saturn, and Pluto, of course, is already in Aquarius. Okay, here's another thing which is going to make this Saturn-Neptune conjunction more powerful. Just 3 days before it happens, we have a solar eclipse, and Saturn is already pretty tightly conjunct Neptune at this point. The solar eclipse is going to energize it. We also have Chiron in a close conjunction with Eris. Chiron often causes wounding. Eris is often experienced as strife. And there are more positive aspects. Chiron brings healing, and I like to think that Eris, in its positive aspects, represents those things we want to strive for. We also, of course, since it's a solar eclipse and a new moon, we have Sun and Moon exactly conjunct, but they're very, very tightly square Uranus. So in the months that follow, expect a certain amount of chaos and breaking up of existing patterns. Since Uranus is still in Taurus, it could be financial patterns that continue to break up, as if we're not seeing enough of that already. Interestingly, my moon is at 27 degrees 45 minutes of Taurus. That's very close to Uranus at the time of the solar eclipse. So I may be cracking up also. You never know. Now there's also some very interesting midpoint configurations occurring during the Saturn-Neptune conjunction on 2026. We're going to have Moon. These are tied. These are all within 15 minutes of orb. And we're going to have Moon at the midpoint between Saturn, Neptune here, and Chiron here. We're going to have Chiron at the midpoint of Mercury and Uranus, and Saturn and Neptune at the midpoint of Uranus and Pluto. Now, another way to diagram this is as follows. Saturn, Neptune at the Pluto-Uranus midpoint, Chiron at the Mercury-Uranus midpoint, and the Moon at the midpoint of Saturn, Neptune, and Chiron. So everything is being funneled through the Moon, and that suggests that whatever happens is going to affect us emotionally, and we're going to feel personally. It could affect us physically, and it could affect our health. Okay, next thing I want to show you is the role that declinations are going to be playing in making this Saturn-Neptune conjunction even more powerful. And I have a graph here of changes in the sun's declination throughout the year. Declination is how far something is north or south of the celestial equator. And this diagram is going to show you exactly why the equinoxes and the solstices are turning points. We start here with the sun at 0 degrees declination at the time of the spring equinox. As we move into summer, the sun moves further and further north, and it reaches its peak distance north of the celestial equator, approximately 23.5 degrees declination. It reaches that at the time of the summer solstice. And then it turns around and starts moving south again. So declination was increasing and then it's decreasing. That makes this summer solstice a turning point. When we get to the fall equinox, the sun is once again at 0 degrees declination. And this is going to be another turning point because we're not only changing from northern declination to southern declination, but graphically, this part of the curve is what in mathematics we call concave down. It looks like a bowl or cup that would spill water. And this part of the curve we call concave up. It looks like a bowl or cup that would hold water. So there is a change in concavity that also occurs as we go from northern to southern declination. So this becomes another turning point. We reach the winter solstice when the sun arrives at its southernmost declination, about 23.5 degrees south of the celestial equator. And that's a turning point because the graph changes from decreasing to increasing. Instead of going further south, we're now going further north. And then at this point, 0 degrees declination, the sun is once again at the spring equinox, and the concavity of this graph is going to change if we continue. And we're changing from southern declination to northern declination. So this shows you exactly why the equinoxes and solstices are turning points. And every cycle for every planet, everything can be represented by the same kind of curve. And so those quarter points like new moon, quarter moon, full moon, third quarter moon, those are all going to be turning points. Okay, now, why am I going over this? Because whenever an outer planet crosses the celestial equator, that's going to be a turning point. And we have turning points coming up with Saturn and Neptune. Very shortly after that exact conjunction of Saturn and Neptune, Saturn will cross the celestial equator going from south to north. I believe that'll be in March. And then in April, Neptune will cross the celestial equator, also going from south to north. Now, when Neptune crosses 0 declination, it denotes a change in the social myth. With both Saturn and Neptune crossing together, expect restructuring of myths. And this is just a magnification of what's going to be happening. Here is where Saturn crosses the celestial equator. In March, not long after that, Neptune will cross, and then it's going to go back and forth across a couple of times, almost reach it again in 2028. So it's going to be a process going on here during which these social myths and beliefs are going to be changing. Now, just to show you what's happened during past crossings of the celestial equator by outer planets, in the 20th century, Neptune and Chiron crossed the 0 declination point together at the end of World War II, and the result was a new worldview coupled with healing. And then during the American Civil Wars, we had Saturn, Neptune, and Pluto crossing the celestial equator about the same time. As a result, social beliefs changed, Neptune, America transformed, Pluto, and Reconstruction, Saturn, followed. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about how this conjunction will impact America. And actually, just to create a context for this, I'm going to first talk about the second administration of Donald Trump, because his administration is the backdrop against which everything will happen. So what I have here is the chart for Inauguration Day. By law, everything begins at 12 noon on January 20th, 2025. Some people will use a slightly different chart, noticing the exact minute that Trump actually utters the words of that oath. I say the process starts at noon by law, and if things happen a little later, it'll probably be similar. But this chart, it's really going to describe what has been going on. Because look, we have Sun very close to the top of the chart, very strongly conjunct Pluto in the 10th house. This suggests a presidency that will grab as much power as it can for itself, for the executive branch. Have we seen that? You betcha. This chart also has Uranus in the first house. This suggests a presidency that will be very chaotic, that will be characterized by a lot of flip-flops and a lot of manic activity. And I think we've seen that too. This chart has Mars conjunct the cusp of the fourth house. And this kind of mundane chart, the fourth house represents the homeland and its people. Has Trump done anything of a Mars aggressive, warlike manner directed toward the homeland? Yes. Look at all the mass deportations. Look at all the people being rounded up and held and deported without due process. Look at the Marines that he brought into uh, Los Angeles, and any claim that that was lawful is very, very dubious. Uh, and Trump also wanted to make the entire southern border a military base, so that any person from another country stepping onto it would automatically be guilty of trespassing and breaking the law. Okay, so all of that's happening. And then we also have this very strong T-square involving Chiron, the moon, and Mercury. Chiron in the 12th house, that suggests wounding ourselves, shooting ourselves in the foot. Opposition moon in the 6th house. The 6th house has to do with health and has to do with workers in America. And the moon is the people, the public. And we're seeing a lot of changes in the structure of our healthcare and health and human services and the CDC. And I believe that as we continue, more and more people will probably be wounded by inflation. And we've already seen thousands of people lose their jobs in this big government restructuring. And then we have Mercury in the 9th house. The 9th house, among other things, has to do with other countries. Mercury has to do, among other things, with commerce and trade. And we're wounding ourselves and wounding others with these tariffs of Trump. So a lot of this seems to be going on. And lastly, I think this is the last thing. Neptune is pretty strongly conjunct the lunar nodal axis. So you might see an uptick in fanaticism, lies, misinformation, disinformation, fantasies, and delusions. I think we have seen an awful lot of that. And we're only about 6 months into the second Trump presidency. Okay, now, here is one particular reason why the Saturn-Neptune conjunction could impact America more than other countries. We're already expecting a big impact on America simply because Neptune last entered Aries at the day after the Civil War began. But if we look at solar arc directions to the USA chart, I tend to use the July 2nd, 1776 chart. because that's when the Continental Congress actually passed the Declaration of Independence. That's when the decision was made to be independent. The July 4th date is when that decision went public. I think both charts work. I think they're both valid. I try to look at both of them. And what I'm saying here applies to both of them. But you can see that we're going to have this year and next, we have solar arc Neptune making a sesquiquadrant to natal Saturn, and solar arc Saturn making a square to natal Neptune. So the Saturn-Neptune discordant energies, they're already in the air for America this year and next. And that creates a resonance with the Saturn-Neptune conjunction. And that's another reason why I think it's going to be more powerful than usual. Okay. When America entered its Civil War, Neptune was at 29 degrees 57 minutes of Pisces. On March 29th, 2025, there was a solar eclipse, and Neptune was at 29 degrees 58 minutes Pisces. Just 1 minute of arc difference from where it was at the start of the American Civil War. This means that this is going to activate that Civil War point. It means there'll probably be more dissatisfaction in America, more divide, more fanatical beliefs, and so on and so forth. And actually, this is going to create some 3-day periods where things can happen related to America. For instance, on March 28th, Neptune was at the Civil War point. On the 29th, it was at the eclipse point. And on the 30th of March, it entered Aries. 2 days after this, Trump imposed all these tariffs, announced all these tariffs, declared it Liberation Day, and the stock market just plummeted in response. This is when it plummeted, April 2nd. It's worked its way up, way back to where it was, so now I'm making some money again, thank goodness. But things are still iffy. When we get into October this year, there will be another similar 3-day period as Neptune is moving retrograde, and this will go from October 22nd to 23rd to 24th. This is when it exits Aries, goes back into Pisces, is at the eclipse point, and then at the Civil War point. And then again, as we approach February 20th next year, we have another 3-day period with these points being activated on January 24th, 25th, and then the 26th. So those could be sensitive times for America, times when various things are more likely. Now, I have here the July 2nd chart that I usually use for America. And over here is the July 4th Sibley chart that many people use. A lot of mundane astrologers really prefer the July 2nd, but like I said, I think they both work. Since the Declaration of Independence was made public on July 4th, for that reason, I see this chart as representing more of America's persona, the way we like to present ourselves to the world. This chart has Moon in Aquarius, and that describes very well the way that we like to see ourselves. We're leaders in technology, we're humanitarian, we're charitable. We export freedom and democracy. We're the shining city on the hill, a light unto the nations. That is our outward persona that we like and the way we like to picture ourselves. But the July 2nd chart, this is one of the big differences between the two. This one has Moon in Capricorn, which is ruled by Saturn. Saturn is all about regulation and control and oppression. And we have our dark side. We have a shameful history with slavery. We at times engaged in genocide against American Indians, the indigenous population in America. We have had oppressed all sorts of different groups in America. American women were one of the last groups to get the right to vote. I think blacks and Native Americans got that right before women did. And even as recent as 1970, a woman could not get a credit card without her husband's approval. And of course, we try and control other countries too. We have a long history. There are times when we have just gone in and assassinated leaders in other countries or paid groups to overthrow them. We still try and control the behavior of other countries through our economic might. So those are two faces of America, and I use both of these charts, and we'll look a little bit at both of them. If we look at the transits to this July 2nd, 1776 chart, at the time of the Saturn-Neptune conjunction, we'll have Saturn-Neptune square Venus, natal Venus. That's going to create a lot of dissatisfaction, feelings of restriction among people. Venus is in Cancer. We just want to feel safe and secure in our own homes with our families. But there are changes taking place which are going to make that more difficult. Also, this is a big one. The transiting lunar nodes are squaring natal Uranus and Gemini. That could draw America into conflict, either at home or abroad. We also have transiting Eris and Chiron square natal Mercury and the Moon. This can bring some wounding to people and to the economy. And also, transiting Pluto will be making a pretty strong sesquiquadrant to natal Mars. And this again can bring forth more violence, more aggressive or warlike tendencies as a result. Now, if I look at the same transits to the Sibley chart, a lot of it's pretty much the same. We won't have such a close square to Venus, but we have Saturn and Neptune very close, actually conjunct the cusp of the fourth house, which represents the homeland and its people. I first heard the great British astrologer Steve Judd mention this, and some of the information on declinations I talked about earlier, I first heard about that through a podcast of the World Astrology Report on YouTube. Okay, so let's see. This is saying that this conjunction will probably affect the people of America quite a bit because of this conjunction to the fourth house. Of course, it's going to be in opposition to the midheaven, so people may not be very happy with their leaders at this point. Chiron and Eris won't be square the moon in this chart, but they will be square Mercury. So again, could be some economic wounding. And the transiting lunar nodes in this chart are also very tightly squaring natal Uranus. So both charts show this potential for economic wounding and for maybe aggressive warlike ventures at home or abroad in America. All right, now this is more informational. This slide tells you exactly when Saturn will square Venus and exactly when Neptune will square Venus. And Neptune square Venus can result in fanatical beliefs, disinformation, discontent. Saturn brings more frustration and discontent. And this is just another way of showing when these squares from Saturn and Neptune to Venus in that July 2nd, 1776 chart will be in effect. And it's pretty much from March of this year through March of next year. We're getting a brief respite right now in July. So I hope everyone's catching their breath. And with regard to the Sibley chart, this shows when Saturn will be exactly conjunct the fourth house and when Neptune will be conjunct the fourth house. And of course, When something's conjunct the fourth house, it's in opposition to the midheaven, uh, the cusp of the 10th house, which represents our country's leaders. And Neptune conjunct fourth house can result in dissolution of structures in the homeland and a zealous opposition to those in power. Saturn brings restructuring. And this graph shows you when Saturn and Neptune will be conjunct the fourth house cusp, which puts them opposite the midheaven. And that's about April through October of this year, February, March of next year, and a little bit in November, December, and January. Okay, let's talk about Saturn, Neptune, and Russia. Now, on the one hand, Russia has a long history of major things happening during Saturn-Neptune conjunctions. And remember that events can occur at least a year before the actual conjunction. So there was a conjunction in 1882. Year before that, Tsar Alexander II was assassinated. Now, Tsar Alexander II, he was a reformer. He was liberal. He was making things better for people when he got assassinated. But he is succeeded by his son, who became Tsar Alexander III. And Tsar Alexander III was far right. And he instituted a law of oppression, and restrictions on Jews in Russia, known as the May Laws in particular, were enacted. We had another conjunction in 1917, and that year saw the collapse of the Russian army, disintegration of Russian Empire, food riots, Bolshevik revolution, which brought a new vision, communism into the forefront as a new vision, but not a good vision. It saw the abdication of Tsar Nicholas II. Of course, he was later assassinated with his family. Elsewhere, America entered World War I. The Spanish flu began in 1918, and radio became very popular. We had a series of conjunctions in 52 and 53. And in 53, we saw the death of Stalin. There were a couple of uprisings in Russia. Khrushchev came into power. Queen Elizabeth had her coronation, and television became very popular. And then in 1989, there were three conjunctions, and a lot of stuff happened. Soviet Union withdrew from Afghanistan. There's the fall of the Berlin Wall, followed by, a few years later, the dissolution of the Soviet Union, the ending of communism in the Eastern Bloc of Europe, the Velvet Revolution in Czechoslovakia, overthrow of the communist dictatorship in Romania. Perestroika continued in the Soviet Union. And by the way, this is very interesting and apropos. The word perestroika means restructuring. And that's what goes on during Saturn-Neptune conjunctions. Also, the Cold War officially ended. If you've been missing it, don't worry, it's back on. Elsewhere in the world, South Africa began to dismantle apartheid. There were famous protests in Tiananmen Square. Some of you may recall that picture of the lone young man facing down a tank in Tiananmen Square. Afterwards, China made some democratic reforms under Deng Xiaoping. Brazil had its first presidential election after the end of military rule, and the first internet service providers emerged, along with the first written proposal for the World Wide Web. The World Wide Web didn't actually get implemented and begin to be used until around the mid-90s, and later we'll see why that happened at that time. Big question, though, is what's going to happen on February 20th, 2026? What will happen in America? What will happen in Russia? What will happen in the world? Will we see some sudden dramatic event like the fall of the Berlin Wall? Or is it going to be a gradual change like the storm surge we get with a hurricane, where the sea level rises gradually, slowly, but it winds up changing everything? Now, for Russia, we know a lot about what's happening in America, and a lot of what's happening in America conforms to the astrology. Russia, though, is a closed society. A lot of the people don't even want to talk to reporters lest the government find out and they get in trouble. So it's very difficult to know exactly what is going on in Russia and with Putin right now. I know a lot of astrologers expect him to be gone within a year or a few more years. Uh, but they're a closed society. We don't know what the news is. Nonetheless, I saw this interesting news article online just a couple of days ago. The headline is "The Collapse of Russia Has Just Begun." So, uh, given that Saturn Neptune conjunction coming up, I tend to believe this headline. Okay, now I want to get into more detail about the Uranus Neptune Pluto double sextile trine. Uh, these bars show when these aspects are going to be within 1 degree orbs. So we see that August, September, October, these two sextiles in the trine, they're all going to be very strong. And then they get within 1 degree orb of each other again in July 2026, in June of 2027, and a little bit in May of 2028. So this is really going to impact us for a while, and it will probably impact us in a very beneficial way, bringing in higher order thinking, more transcendent thinking. And this slide is informational. It shows you we're going to have a tremendous 5 exact trines between Uranus and Pluto between 2026 and 2028. We'll have 5 exact sextiles of Uranus and Neptune from 2025 through 2027. And we have a whole bunch of exact sextiles of Neptune and Pluto coming up from 2026 through 2032. Again, children born under these configurations, they're going to be much more open, much more transcendent, much more cosmic than people born at other times. And when they grow up, 20 years from now, when we get toward the end of the 2040s, into the 2050s, they will start doing tremendous things, I'm sure, at least some of them. Now, there's also several times that Neptune is going to be at the midpoint of Uranus and Pluto, even when it's not making those sextiles. And these midpoint configurations started in September of 2023, a lot of 2024. Here we are in 2025. They continue into 2026. They don't completely go away until 2028. So effectively, since 2023, there have been, the transformative energies of Pluto, the creative energies of Uranus breaking up patterns. That has been funneled through Neptune to create new visions. And we're already seeing and have seen a lot of that in the world. Just look at artificial intelligence. Okay, now we'll have 5 exact trines between Uranus and Pluto. But these trines, they are part of this much larger Uranus-Pluto cycle. So to fully understand these trines, we have to go back to the most recent conjunction of Uranus and Pluto. And those conjunctions happened in the latter half of the 60s, the 1960s. It was this conjunction of Uranus and Pluto in Virgo in 1965 that changed our world forever. All the rules, social rules of the 40s and 50s they went out the window now. Societies around the world changed dramatically. And we had an opposition to this conjunction of Uranus and Pluto. There was a Saturn Chiron conjunction in Pisces. Uh, Chiron, at best, Chiron orbits between Saturn and Uranus. It's like a bridge between the visible planets and the invisible planets. So it's at its best as this little drive inside of us that looks at the world and says, there must be something more than this. It urges us to seek transcendence, to understand those things which are not visible. And just as all the rules of society were changing, a lot of people also began to get interested in and adopt these Eastern spiritual disciplines. This is when meditation and gurus became very popular. And the trine from Neptune uh, helped that along. Now we had the next conjunction of Uranus and Pluto uh, in April of 1966. And it is still in Virgo and still in opposition to Saturn conjunct Chiron, and Neptune is still making its trine here. We got a third conjunction of Uranus and Pluto in June, end of June in 1966. Saturn and Chiron are still closely conjunct, still trine Neptune. It's not any close opposition to Uranus-Pluto again, but these outer planet conjunctions, they drove all this tremendous social change that we had in the second half of the 60s. Things that were very prominent in the civil rights movement, the environmental movement, uh, liberalism of all sorts, the sexual revolution. All of these things were going on. And if we follow the cyanotic cycle from this point onward, we can understand a lot of our more recent history. Going to make a little digression here. And also in summer of 1966, we had this really interesting grand trine, actually a double grand trine, all these sextiles going around. But I'm focusing on this one trine where we have Jupiter in Cancer. It's conjunct Mars, which energizes it. And Jupiter's expansion in Cancer is all about families. And we were redefining families at this point. We were moving away from the family you're born into the family you make. And hippie communes were cropping up all over the place. Neptune is in Scorpio. And the anthem back then was, if it feels good, do it. There was this unbridled hedonism. And with Saturn conjunct Chiron in Pisces, the regulatory mechanisms of Saturn were being weakened. So again, tune in, turn on, drop out. If it feels good, do it. That is what guided people at this time. And marijuana and psychedelic drugs became very popular. Let's fast forward to July 29th, 2013. We have a very similar configuration, another double grand trine, sextiles going all the way around. Jupiter in Cancer again, conjunct Mars. Families were being redefined once again. This time it was gay marriage, which either recently had or is about to be legalized. And one of the most popular shows on television at that time was a show called Modern Family, which was all about how families are expanding and being redefined. There was a big push at this time to legalize medical marijuana and then follow that up with legalization for recreational marijuana. But notice the difference in this grand trine. You still have Jupiter here, Chiron over here, but Saturn and Neptune have switched places. Saturn is now in Scorpio, so the motto at this time was legalization with regulation. And Neptune in Pisces, that's its home. It functions well there. And so these psychedelic substances were being legalized along with regulation to make it work. Okay, now getting back to the Uranus-Pluto synodic cycle, well, we get to the waxing sextile in the mid-90s. And notice where Uranus is in here. It's in the first degree of Aquarius. How often have we seen this point being activated? Um, the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction a few years ago, it happened within the first degree of Aquarius. So with this first sextile, what do we get? We're getting um, a lot of new technology. This is what we call the dot-com revolution. And this is about the time the World Wide Web became available and was becoming popular, and people were creating web pages and surfing the web every week. And desktop computers were appearing in offices and on desktops at home. And things were liberal during this period. This was kind of the height of the Bill Clinton progressivism during his presidency. And we get another Uranus sextile Pluto in, let's see, August 7th, 1995. Another one on March 8th, 1996. A fourth one on September 20th, 1996. And again, Uranus is back in that first degree of Aquarius. And we had a big technical revolution during that time. Everyone was getting, everything was being wired for the internet. And we had our last Uranus sextile Pluto aspect in February 5th of 1997. Okay. Now, in a lot of ways, politically, despite Monica Lewinsky, these were very progressive times. And I thought we were really moving in the right direction. Everything kind of crashed in 2000 with the dot-com crash and George W. Bush, however, being elected president instead of Clinton's vice president. Okay, now, the next major thing in the synodic cycle was the square between Uranus and Pluto, which we started to experience that in 2012. And if you think of these synodic cycles as being like a relationship, where the initial conjunction of the two planets it's the vision, that desire, that wish to have a relationship. The sextile is like the first date. And then you get to the square, and that's after the first date when one or both parties may be thinking to themselves, wait a minute, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to continue in this direction? Well, that was happening in 2012 when the progressivism of Barack Obama started to really be strongly countered and stymied by a more conservative Republican Congress. And so we got this conservative backlash that began in 2012. Oops. Continued 2013, 2014, 2015, and culminated in that famous descent down the escalator of Donald Trump at Trump Tower on June 16, 2015, in order to announce his presidential candidacy. Just a few months after this exact square between Uranus and Pluto. So, those Uranus-Pluto squares, they gave us Trump. Now, we're moving into this series of 5 trines and the kind of progressive politics that began in the 60s The kind of progressivism we saw in the 90s under Bill Clinton, that is probably coming back to the world. And we also expect to see certain things as a result of Pluto in Aquarius, Uranus in Gemini, and Neptune in Aries. In particular, I'm expecting advances in artificial intelligence, quantum computing, 6G connectivity, augmented reality, sustainable technology, battery innovations just from Pluto and Aquarius. From Uranus and Gemini, I'm expecting innovations in communication and inventiveness on steroids. And as Zuckerberg said the other day, it might be the smart glasses that are the next big thing that everyone buys. And with Neptune at the midpoint, the focus will be on turning visions into reality. Neptune and Aries. Now, following this exact trine on the 17th, we have what the late great mundane astrologer Andre Barbeau felt would be the most harmonious day of the century, July 21st, 2026. We have so many sextiles and trines, and look at how exact these aspects are. Pluto 4 degrees, Neptune 4 degrees, Uranus 4 degrees, Jupiter 4 degrees, Chiron 0 degrees, South Node 0 degrees, Moon 0 degrees, North Node 0 degrees. We've got double sextile trines and a mystic rectangle in here. This is all reminiscent to me of a period from 577 to 574 BCE before the Common Era, when these outer planets, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, made a series of conjunctions with one another. And the result was the birth of Taoism, Confucianism, Buddhism, the golden age of Greek philosophy, the writing of some of the Upanishads, and the writing of the Torah, among other things. These all reflected the higher, more transcendent ideas that got grounded into the Earth plane when these outer planets came into conjunction. Now, let's go back here. Because we have so many sextiles here, it's going to tend to activate what we call the six harmonic chart. And the six harmonic chart, all these planets making sextiles, they're going to become conjunct one another. Now, where the moon winds up at in that six harmonic chart will differ depending upon what time of the day you look at. But the other planets, they're going to be pretty much where they are, regardless of what time of day you set up this six harmonic chart for. So in the six harmonic chart, we have Jupiter, Uranus, Pluto, and Neptune all pretty strongly conjunct, and they're going to be making a strong sextile to Saturn in Gemini. And that tells me that the energies released on this day, they are going to change the way people are thinking. And these higher inspirations, people are going to try and make them concrete one way or another. It could also impact communication in some form or fashion. Okay, our second Uranus trine Pluto aspect will occur. So if this isn't the second one, I'm just repeating the first one on July 17th, 2026. And one of the things I want you to notice is that every time we have an exact trine between Uranus and Pluto, this Uranus-Neptune-Pluto double sextile trine, it's also going to be pretty strong. So here's our second Uranus exact trine between Uranus and Pluto on March 29th, 2026. And we still have this Uranus, Saturn, Neptune, Pluto, double sextile trine pretty strong. And we have another double sextile trine being formed, this time with the Sun involved. Our third exact trine between Uranus and Pluto will be June 15th, 2027. And again, we have the usual Uranus, Neptune, Pluto double sextile trine. But we also have a Jupiter, Sun, Saturn, Chiron double sextile trine in effect here. And let's see, the next exact Uranus trine Pluto is on January 12th, 2028. We have this usual Uranus, Neptune, Pluto double sextile trine. And we've got a moon nodal axis double sextile trine also with Uranus and Neptune. And a mystic rectangle if we throw Jupiter into the mix here. And let's see, is this our fifth? Yeah, last exact trine between Uranus and Pluto is on May 9th, 2028. And we have Uranus, Mercury, sextile Neptune, sextile Pluto, trine Uranus and Mercury. And the moon will be forming another double sextile trine. So during these periods where we have Uranus trine Pluto, we're getting more. We're getting double sextile trines, and often we're getting two double sextile trines. So this is going to be a very harmonious period. This is our hope for the future. This is why I have some hope for the future. If we can avoid a lone madman unleashing World War III and nuclear annihilation. If we can avoid that, uh, we have not only Saturn Neptune, a once every 6,000 years Saturn Neptune conjunction occurring, but we also have these incredible configurations, these five exact trines between Uranus and Pluto, these incredible Uranus, Neptune, Pluto double sextile trines that are joined in by other double sextile trines. This is going to make it easier for these higher energies, these higher inspirations to work together in a coordinated way and come into physical manifestation in physical reality here on Earth. So, do I expect a bumpy ride? Yes. Will mankind come to an end? It's still possible, but if we can avoid nuclear war and a few other bad things that lone individuals can force upon the world, an incredible future awaits. Something incredible is coming. Here in this graphic ephemeris, you can see when those Uranus-Pluto trines will occur, and down here in this graph you see also the exact dates. Okay, the winds of war, question mark. This is part of the bumpy ride ahead for both America and Russia. Now, if we look at progress charts for America, and I'm going to show you some graphs here for both the July 2nd chart and then the July 4th Sibley chart. In the July 2nd chart, you can see in 2026, 2027, progress Sun is square natal Mars. That can be very aggressive. That can make war more likely. For the Sibley chart, that's starting this year. It reaches a peak on March 4th of next year, not long after that exact conjunction between Saturn and Neptune, and continues a little bit into 2027. Okay, now America tends to be engaged in conflict whenever Uranus returns to Gemini, particularly about 8 degrees Gemini, which was its position when America declared independence from Britain. And I have here, for your information, dates when Uranus enters or exits Gemini, and when the exact Uranus returns will occur. And during past Uranus returns, we had the Civil War, and we also had the Manhattan Project going on strong in 43, 44. We had already entered World War II in 1941, just a few months after Uranus entered Gemini. The Manhattan Project was about purifying, enriching uranium so we could make an atom bomb, that first atom bomb, Uranus, uranium, seems to be a connection here. Now, this slide, I put it in here because I want to show you just how powerful squares and aspects from the nodes can be. This is a chart of transits to the July 2nd, 1776 chart. And the transiting date is January 6, 2021, the insurrection and assault on the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. And notice that Uranus is making a very strong square to the lunar nodal axis. This is also present in the Sibley chart. But additionally, in the July 2nd chart, the transiting lunar nodes are very strongly making a conjunction and opposition to natal Mars. So there was a lot of tension, a lot of aggression that day. Okay, now the thing about the nodes is Pluto is soon going to be conjunct the south node in the July 2nd, July 4th charts for America. And here is some of the history of past interactions between Pluto and the nodes. When Pluto was last conjunct the south node, it was the American Revolution going on. When it squared the nodal axis, that was the buildup, the prelude to the American Civil War. And there was a lot of skirmishes going on before the war officially began. When Pluto was conjunct the north node, it was World War II and the Manhattan Project that we were involved in. And during the mid-80s, Pluto made another square to the nodal axis. Fortunately, we had evolved enough at that point that we didn't get into a war. But tensions between Russia and America, the Soviet Union, America, they were very, very high, and the people in charge of the doomsday clock kept moving that minute hand closer and closer to midnight. Interestingly, some of you may know this, some of you may be old enough to remember this. On August 17th, 1987, there was an event, a turning point on the Mayan calendar that became known in other countries as the harmonic convergence. People all around the world engaged in mass meditation. Many of them made pilgrimages to sacred sites. I went to these pyramids in Palenque, Mexico, to meditate. And sure enough, a few months after that, in the fall, Ronald Reagan and Gorbachev finally met face to face, and they became best buds. They were the best of friends, and the tensions quickly subsided. Okay, now, here is what America is moving into. A period when Pluto will conjunct the South Node from 2027 through 2028. And then we have Uranus returns in 2027 and 2028. So we have some overlap here when there is a heightened risk that America could become involved in some sort of aggression, either at home or abroad. If we are evolved enough, like we were back in the 80s, we can avoid direct conflict. That is what I'm hoping for, but there is a heightened risk of this in 2027, 2028. And just as Uranus seems to have a connection with uranium and the atomic bomb, so does Pluto seem to have a connection with plutonium and even more powerful bombs. Okay. This slide just shows you some Uranus aspects from Uranus to the January 2nd, 1776 chart for America from 2025 through 2029. And you can see when the Uranus returns are going to occur. This next chart shows some Neptune aspects to this chart. And Let's see, for Neptune square Venus, I've this shows when it will be exact, and let's see, this is showing in 2029 we have Neptune square the Sun. It doesn't become exact, but it's within 1 degree orb from May through September. So this could be very impactful. This is where we have Neptune square Jupiter. In the July 2nd and July 4th charts for America, we have Neptune square Mars in both those charts. So we have a tendency for fanaticism, illusion to lead us into conflict. So anytime Neptune is doing things, those are times when we could be more delusional and when I get concerned about stuff. Okay, here are some aspects from Pluto, and let's see. On this one, there are going to be some times when Pluto is opposite the north node, which means it's conjunct the south node. Uh, that is going to happen from February through August of 2027. Some little glitch in this other program did not put that here, but here you can see the times in 2028 and into 2029 when we have Pluto conjunct the south node opposite the north node. And we have this period, of course, where Pluto is making a sesquiquadrant to Mars. Sesquiquadrats don't seem to be as powerful as squares, but they can be like breaking points, turning points, times when tensions can just become too much and you have the straw that breaks the camel's back. So there'll be some increased tensions in 2026, 2027, for sure. And I think we have maybe some of that going on now. Okay, and here are times when Chiron will be making some hard aspects to the July 2nd chart for America. And I'm concerned about these periods of Chiron square Mercury and the moon. That is when we could have some economic problems, as an example. And uh, and the people could be wounded in some way. We're also having Chiron moving into these squares to Pluto. I think it's already pretty much square Pluto right now. And these are times when uh, the country could be wounded, its power could be wounded, its leaders could be wounded, or the presidency could be wounded. I believe we have Chiron within 1 degree of exact square to Pluto right now, but it's not showing up here probably because it doesn't become exact this year. But we can see ways in which Trump's power is being wounded at this point with the Jeffrey Epstein affair and so forth. Okay, if we look at progressions, here's a period where we have Sun, progressed Sun, square Mars. The good news is we'll also have progressed Venus making a sextile to Jupiter. That throws us a lifeline. A sextile between these two benefics is certainly beneficial. And then later on, we're going to have Venus square the nodal axis and progressed Sun in opposition to natal Neptune. So that could be a time of illusion, fanaticism, disillusion of some sort. We'll have to see what the mood of the country is as we approach 2028 and 2029. Now, modern Russia began on December 25th, 1991, but its birth time is debatable. However, with Saturn in Aquarius opposite Chiron in Leo, Russia could either integrate healing into the structure of its collaborations with its Baltic neighbors, or it could seek to control them and wound them. And it looks like Putin has chosen the latter path. By the way, Putin was born under a pretty tight Saturn-Neptune conjunction. So this one coming up could impact him a lot also. Uh, Let me go back here just a second. Yeah. So from February 26th through 2026 through, let me start over. From 2026 through 2029, Pluto transformation will make 5 conjunctions with Russia's natal Saturn, restriction and structure, transformation of structure, followed by 5 oppositions with natal Chiron, wounding from this transformation. This could indicate more conflicts for Russia. So Russia has some bad times lying ahead, probably from 2026 through 2029. And of course, we just saw America has some tough times lying ahead. This doesn't mean they'll be at war with one another, and hopefully there will be no more big wars. And wars that are on now, hopefully they will end. But just as America has a bit of a bumpy road ahead, so does Russia. And a big question is Putin strong enough, powerful enough to withstand the coming storms, or is he going to be swept away by the current? If we look at Uranus aspects to this 1991 chart for Russia, uh, we have Uranus square Moon in 2026, 2027. That might be when people start rebelling. And if we look at hard aspects from Neptune, we have Neptune square the Sun in 2026, 2027. So that's going to overlap uh, with these Uranus squares to the Moon. And in 2026, 2027, we have transiting Pluto will be conjunct Saturn. So that's a transformation of structures, uh, fanaticism, or new ideologies, and revolution by the people. That could be what's in store. And then in 2028, 2029, that's when we get those 5 oppositions to Chiron from Pluto, and that's when Russia may be experiencing a lot of wounding. And then also in 2028, 2029, Chiron will be squaring that Saturn-Chiron opposition, making squares to Saturn first, followed by squares to Chiron. So that's when a lot of their structures could be dismantled and more wounding could take place. In the progress chart, Russia is going to have progress Sun opposite Chiron starting later this year, going through 2027. And progress Mars will be conjunct Neptune. War based on fanatical beliefs. Don't like that prospect, but that could last through 2029. Okay, just about at the end. Here are a few other things. Just almost as if not enough is, we haven't seen enough stuff going on. There's more. During much of the 10-year period from 2025 through 2035, Pluto will spend much of its time. I need to get rid of that apostrophe there. Sorry about that typo. Much of its time out of bounds in the southern latitudes. And this is a time when people will tend to rebel. Rosa Fenn, astrologer, has written a great article on this that's available at astro.com. You can just go there and search for Rosa Fenn within their web pages. Also, I think she recently did a Star Club presentation for ESAR on Pluto being out of bounds. I haven't seen it, but excuse me, I'll try and see that soon. So, when people, according to her, when people go out of bounds, or I'm sorry, when Pluto goes out of bounds in southern latitudes, people tend to rebel. They rise up. And that's what we're going to be seeing over the next 10 years. Protests of people, more people power. Another thing, got 2 more slides here. The Barbeau Planetary Cycle Index. This was created by the late great mundane astrologer Andre Barbeau, and all it is a cumulative sum of the distances between the outer planets Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto. And when those planets are all kind of close to one another, the index is low. But having the planets close to one another, it creates an imbalance. It's like having a saucer, say, to represent our zodiac. You're trying to balance it on a stick, but you put all the weights on one side and you can't balance it. And when these planets get really close together, that's when things really go wacko. And we entered this period during which we would see the low for the Barbeau Planetary Cycle Index beginning at the start of 2020. And because of that, 10 years earlier, Andre Barbeau predicted in 2010 that there would probably be a global pandemic starting in 2020. And of course, that is when COVID began. This planetary cycle index reached its absolute low in March of 2022, just a few weeks after Russia invaded Ukraine. The good news is the cycle index, it's reached its low for the century. It's on its way up, and we're about here right now. So things are going to, in general, tend to get better from now on. And so that should also give us some reason for hope. We're going to be going through an awful lot of change over the next 5 or 10 years, particularly the second half of the 2020s. There's always the possibility that a single person could cause some great catastrophe in the world. But on the astrology, which sort of tells us how the masses are moving, we're going to go through a lot of change. Some countries like America and Russia are going to have a little bit of a bumpy road, but there are a lot of beneficial aspects going on which will give us hope. And the Barbeau Planetary Cycle Index rising also gives us hope. Now, this last slide, I have a quad wheel where I have this July 2nd chart for America as the innermost wheel. You could easily put the July 4th Sibley chart here for what I want to show. Next, you have Donald Trump's natal chart, then his progress chart, and then the transits on August 30th of 2025. And one thing I want to point out here is something I think Gary Lawrenson showed us about a year ago during his presentation to this group. But before I talk about that, notice that just like Russia, we have Saturn in opposition to Chiron. Okay? The opposition doesn't look that strong. It's about 6 degrees from being exact, but stronger than you would think because this is a chart for the Declaration of Independence, right? At the beginning of the summer of 1776, Saturn and Chiron were in exact opposition. By the end of the summer of 1776, they were in exact opposition again. So this whole summer was really about Saturn opposition Chiron. Those energies were in the air all summer long. And the Declaration of Independence represents the best of this opposition. The best of this opposition with Chiron and Aries, that refers to recognizing the spiritual worth and dignity of every individual. And Saturn in Libra has to do with the structure of our relationships. And America, at its best, integrates this idea of the spiritual worth of every individual into the structure of its relationships with its people and with other countries. That is America at its best. At its worst, though, we get America wounding other countries and trying to control other countries. Now, Trump's Chiron at 14 plus degrees Libra is conjunct America's Saturn at 14 plus degrees Libra. As I see it, no individual in my lifetime has done more to wound and dismantle the structures of America's government and America's democracy more than Donald Trump. Now, if you are a supporter of Trump, you're going to see this differently. You'll see this as him draining the swamp. What Gary Lawrenson, I think it's Gary Lawrenson who pointed this out to us. He pointed out that someone pointed out that Trump's progressed Mars is at 14 plus degrees of Libra this year. Consequently, his tendency to either drain the swamp, get rid of the deep state, or, as I see it, dismantle our government and our democracy, it's on steroids now. With his Mars conjunct his Chiron, conjunct the Saturn, that whole process is on steroids. If you look at this transiting chart for August 30th, 2025, transiting Mars will be conjunct all of this. It'll be exactly conjunct his Chiron on this date. And so, given this configuration, I'm really curious what's going to happen to Trump around August 30th. Will he be just a very, very angry person that day? Will he announce new policies to wound people, dismantle governmental structures on that day? Will he have an accident on that day? Will someone try and attack him on that day? I don't know. I just know what the weather looks like and what things have a heightened risk of taking place. So, all of this is going to be going on August 30th. We have quite a ride ahead of us for America and for Russia in the years ahead, but we're on the cusp of incredible changes, and some of those configurations, those double sextile trines, all of that stuff should give us hope that we're moving into a better future. And let's see, I think that is the last slide. And so I'm back. And the one thing I can recommend to everyone at this time to help make this transition work better is to do the sort of thing that we did back in 1987 at the Harmonic Convergence. Spend a lot of time in deep spiritual meditation. Find that point of love and oneness within inside of you and make contact with it as frequently as you can over the next few years. This is a time when it will be easier to draw these higher energies into ourselves and into the planet. And the more of us that do this, the more likely we are to see positive change in this period that we're moving into. And as more and more people open up their minds, they will first change themselves, and then they will change the world that we live in. And those people who are causing trouble in the world, they will have less and less power to do so as we go forward. So that's it for this presentation. This has been about an hour and 46 minutes I've been talking. So I'm going to go through it this fast when I do it for Astrology Arizona this weekend. But if you're watching this, I hope you enjoy it. I hope you make contact with that still small voice within, that point of love and oneness and unity within. And I hope you help all of us change this world for the better. So let's all stay optimistic and look forward to a bright new future. That's it for today, so I'll just say so long and be well.